The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Quirky Dog Podcast, inspired by some of the quirkiest dogs you can ever imagine, and the owners who love them. This podcast is brought to you by the quirky couple themselves, Scott and Jess Williams. Their aim is to educate and entertain. Here's Scott and Jess.
Welcome, guys, and happy Wednesday. Today we are going to talk about what to do when your dog gets a boo-boo, but first we're going to start with the quirky tip of the day. Scott had the pig have some cigar smoke before we started, so now he puffed out the smoke. Very funny and mature.
That's my contribution.
I was thinking last week when we had the gold pig, rather than Chrissy honking it, we should have just shaken it and had it be the sound of a piggy bank. We're now since filling the gold pigs from the Cigar Expo with change, and it's very fun to have a little piggy bank as adults. Okay, quirky tip of the day is arnica. You guys, I am obsessed with arnica. It is a great homeopathic. Whole Foods used to sell it. I do not think they're selling it anymore. You can get it on Amazon. Super great to have around your house. I'm sure we've discussed it from various aspects before, but arnica is a great anti-inflammatory. If your dog's experienced any trauma, you can take, 3 to 4 of these little pellets and put them in between your dog's gum line and its lip and just kind of let them dissolve. You can also have it in 2 teaspoons of distilled water. Actually, it's 2 tablespoons, I think. 2 tablespoons of distilled water, 10 pellets, shake it up, and then you can just resuccuss that and give that to the dog through a syringe. But arnica is great to have around and a really good tip for boo-boos. So a few weeks back, we did a wound episode, which is like when there's something on the dog that is some sort of an open wound. When we're talking about boo-boos in this episode, it's more like if you see your dog has a little gait change, a little bit of hitch in his gait, limping, XYZ, what do you do? And we're doing a lot of these like give free information episodes because we've been getting a lot of good feedback lately. I get emails out of the blue like, hey, we heard about giving the dog peroxide. We saw it eat a toy. The dog threw up the toy. We avoided a vet visit and a major surgery and stuff. People seem to like these little tips and tricks. So of course, number 1, consult your veterinarian. We are not veterinary professionals up here or anything else, but we are discussing little things that we do that have helped us over the years after owning dogs for decades.
That's a good way to lose weight, too, after dinner. Just have a little peroxide.
My God. We're moving on to boo-boos.
Okay.
So I would say the worst boo-boo that you've ever had on a dog was Jimmy's TPLO stuff, right?
Yeah.
The torn CCLs.
Yeah, well, the most expensive boo-boo, I'll tell you that much.
Well, no, I mean, really, you haven't had any major...
I had a broken tooth, had a broken canine, had to go get a root canal on that.
Limping-wise, that's the biggest to do. So a lot of times... dogs will some dogs, it depends on the dog's level of stoicism, and I'm not knocking dogs that aren't stoic by any stretch of the imagination, but some dogs step on frickin' prickly grass and they're 3-legged for an hour. Some dogs literally will look like they're completely normal until the pain is so bad that then they just, barely have a little hitch or something. So it really kind of depends on your dog's level of sensitivity and their level of stoicism. But for the most part, if you see your dog where the dog limps or the dog all of a sudden is 3-legged, our number 1 thing to do is to contain the dog. We're going to be crating the dog, giving the dog some rest. You don't want to just kind of be like, oh, let's see how this plays out. Now, I'm not saying crate the dog for, 10 days to 2 weeks and the dog gets no movement. Motion is important a lot of times, too, when, recovering from something or anything else. When it came down to Jimmy, he had a full tear on his CCL. That was about a year ago where he did the first one. He was never going to weight bear on that leg again. There was just nothing.
He was just 3-legged.
Yeah, there was nothing. He really couldn't even toe touch. If you have a partial CCL tear, you can kind of toe touch and walk, and you're mostly 3-legged, but you're trying. I mean, he was on 3 legs. We literally had no options. So, as far as that goes, of course, you have to intervene. That was a major surgery. That was a big to-do. But a lot of times when, dogs are 3-legged lame, the next day they look a little bit better. If they're, have a little bit of hitch in their gait, if you give them some rest, they look a little bit better. Maybe it gets, flared up again with activity. So we're kind of going to discuss the nuance of that today, because everybody's first thought is, oh my God, I got to get to the vet. And yes, that is a good way to go, and that is a good rule of thumb. And It's really important that, a professional can look at the dog. But I would say for us, we at least give it 24 to 48 hours, depending on what the issue is with our own personal dogs, before we're rushing to a vet. Because more often than not, a vet is just going to say, put the dog on carprofen or Remedal or something. And not that there's any issue with that, but that's just basically an anti-inflammatory drug that's going to mask the pain. And sometimes there can be interactions with organs and everything else. So we do some troubleshooting on our own, first and foremost.
They probably would want to do an X-ray, and I would
that's
say
not the first. That's not the first thing the vet does typically.
Well, being more seasoned dog people, the first thing you're doing is playing with their range of motion and seeing where the source of the pain actually is. Is it the shoulder? Is it the elbow? Is it the toes? Trying to figure out what's going on with the dog, looking for this hot spot, this pain point.
And that is a really good point. And these were even on my list. Look at them go. Toes. A lot of times if a dog is limping, it is coming from their toes. It's their feet. It's not necessarily their shoulder or anything else. So being able to, check those toes, touch those toes without, getting reactivity or aggression, super important. What Scott's talking about, passive range of motion, PROM. Huge, huge, huge thing as a dog owner, you guys. Go on YouTube, look up some videos of, these certified physical therapists doing it. I'm sure Debbie Gross-Saunders has a lot of good videos on it. PROM is passive range of motion. I really like to do it with the dogs laying on their sides. Cousteau I do when he's standing, but our dogs will accept extending front legs, bending legs, extending back legs, lifting up the hips so they're, a little bit wide. I have a baseline of what that looks like and feels like with each of our dogs. So that's my first go-to. If I see something, as I'm doing passive range of motion, is there a restriction there? Is there a trigger point there? Is there something where the dogs are showing me, yes, this is the ouchie spot? And that's a really, really good thing to have in your toolbox. And it's a great, just calming activity to teach the dogs. Like for Sink, if she's out and about, I tell her do stretchies and she lays on her side. And we've used that a lot. Dogs can be manipulated a lot easier and it's easier for an exam. And it's something that we definitely reference at home ourselves first and foremost.
And it's definitely not going to be easy if you've never done it before and now the dog has pain.
Yeah.
And now you're trying to get them on their side, manipulate their leg, all that stuff.
And you don't know what their baseline is. It's really important that you have a baseline. Bobby Lyons, we've had her on the podcast a few times. Her thing, and it's a great thing to consider, is get some video of your dog when they're well. Like, get some video of your dog, just what their baseline is, just what they look like when they're moving, so you have an easy way to compare when you're looking and like, oh, that rear left looks a little bit off. I'm a little cuckoo crazy. I see our dogs move on a daily basis in an athletic type of movement and just trotting around the house and, up and down the stairs. I'm pretty well aware of how our own personal dogs move. And when I say we don't rush to the vet, if a pet dog for some reason comes up three-legged, I'm calling the vet right away. I'm freaking out. I'm making sure that, okay, is something crazy going on here? Is it's some osteosarcoma, this bone cancer, that there's a broken bone? I really have to delve into it. When it's not my own dog, if I see a dog that's three-legged, I'm not just waiting it out. That is really important for me that I get that dog seen right away. And that has not happened to us that often, probably 3 to 4 times over the last decade that's come up. But we're using a vet's opinion right away. And also, I'm circling a vet in because if you're going to be giving Remedal or something, you want to make sure the organ values and everything are at an okay baseline. And I'm not going to start messing with someone else's dog with those kind of drugs if it's not recommended by a vet and if the owner doesn't agree and everything else. And with that said, as we're making that call to the vet because we're concerned that a pet dog is limping or three-legged or something else, we're looping the owner in at that exact moment as well. But when it comes to our own personal dogs, I know them quite well. I'm quite well aware of their level of stoicism and everything else, and we're doing some troubleshooting stuff at home. And I would say 95% of the time, things resolve on their own.
Well, I think you should tell the story about Sink out on the deck, limping around.
Oh, I will. Okay, so I think it was after Jimmy's second TPLO or something else was going on. Oh, I think Jimmy just had a bout of tummy upset, if you want to call it that. I thought he had pancreatitis or prostatitis, but he just had a bad reaction from tripe. I had spent $800 at the vet the weekend before. I'm trying to get his stomach better, everything else. I come home that day, it's like a Monday afternoon, and I go to let Sink out, and she's doing this weird thing where she's kicking. Now, I thought it looked neurological. I did not think that she was physically hurt. I thought the way that she was presenting looked neurological. Freaking out, called my vet. What time did they close? 6. It was 5:45. Calling to see what emergency vet to take her to. And then, of course, I check her toes, and she had just stepped in some poop, and it was bothering her, and I took that off of her pad. So first and foremost, you do want to check your dog's pads.
Visual inspection.
Yes, pads, nails, everything else. Make sure that there's not something there. Sometimes they can step on like a little pricker or something when they're out, get kind of like a little splinter in their paw, something like that. Easy to remove. Really was easy to take out freaking a paper towel and pull it off of her leg, and then she stopped trying to wipe her back legs and all of that. But we've had stuff over the years. I mean, even since we've been in Maine, Cousteau, I think, has probably pulled some muscles before going for the ball. He comes up lame for a few days. We move the crate downstairs. If you're having any lameness of any sort, if you can avoid it, if you don't live, in a 3-story building without an elevator, you're not going to have your dog doing stairs. Stairs is going to put more pressure on that dog. The dog's coming in and out, keeping the dog very, very quiet. Arnica would be one of the first things I do. I'm giving arnica when I see an issue like this, lowering inflammation. I really like standard process turmeric forte. You can get this on Amazon. It's quite expensive, but it's a great product. I'm giving arnica and 2 turmeric fortes. Pretty much any issue that I see, that's one of my first go-tos with our own personal dogs. Resting, as we said in the very beginning, I'm going to crate rest that dog for at least 24 hours. Is the dog worse? Is the dog better the next day? I went to a Frisbee seminar with Vital this fall, and I put her away. It was literally like a 15-minute slot, and I kind of tweaked my knee during the whole thing, so whatever. I put her away. She was totally fine, jumped in the car, drove home 2 hours. When I went to take her out, she was like 3-legged on her rear, and I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. We'd just gone through all the stuff with Jimmy. I was super, super stressed. And I put her away, and the next morning she was much, 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 much better. I babied that situation a lot longer than I would have with maybe another dog. I think partially because we had just gone through 2 TPLOs with Jimmy. It was very stressful. There was a lot of trauma there. And also, Vital's a really pedal to the metal dog. So I kept her on leash for quite a while, and I evaluated her for quite a while until she could be seen by one of my professional vets. We went to my Eastern vet, and she had some chiro, and she was cleared, if you will. That was kind of an important thing for me. So we handle each situation differently, but this stuff pops up in our house, and I know it pops up for other people too. So I think it's good to just have some tips and some tricks in your toolbox for when you're seeing your dog show some signs of lameness. Yeah,
getting back to Cousteau, where he was running for a ball and then came back with his back leg hitched, with a hitch in his leg. We moved his crate downstairs, so there was no stairs. But that dog did not do anything off leash for about a week. Mm-hmm. Going out to go potty, back in the crate. Everything on leash. There was no running. There was no freedom where he could just carelessly jump off 3 steps to get into the yard or any of that stuff to make sure that he was getting healed up. Because if he wasn't improving after, 3-4 days.
Or if he was getting worse.
Yeah, then obviously he's got to go to the vet. There's something more going on.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Not only the crate rest, but control outside of the crate, outside for pottying, everything else. It's your dog can re-injure themselves, your dog can hurt themselves, slipping on ice, doing stairs incorrectly or stairs at all, and running around because they saw a squirrel. So all really good points. All right, let's go to break super quick. When we get back, we're going to talk a little more about this.
Want to keep up with all the latest from the Quirky Dog podcast like me and Murphy here? Then make sure you head on over to the YouTube channel and subscribe. Or if you prefer to listen to the madness, go on over to iTunes or Spotify and follow the Quirky Dog podcast. And hey, while you're there, leave a rating and review and let them know what you think of the show. Until then, keep it quirky.
Okay, a few other things. So we did have the Canaps on a few years ago around the holidays when they released the Paw Wave. This is a doggy massager. There are 2 different types of them. There may be more now, but we own 2 different types. There's different levels for this. So I don't know, you can't really hear it through the microphone, but there's level 1 to level 5. This is a great product to have. There's a couple different ones out there. We have a friend borrowing our other one right now who's dealing with some spinal degeneration issues with her dog, and she said it's helping with the pain. Not everyone is a freaking massage therapist, okay? And not everyone has a massage therapist for their dogs. Of course, we do because we're crazy, but it's nice to be able to have something right at home where you can use this and kind of evaluate. And I would also condition your dog to something like this before they're injured as well, so you can tell, oh, is this a fear response because they're concerned about the vibration of this, or is this a pain response because they really tweak something? A lot of times when there's limbs coming up, it can be stemming from the back, right? There's they tweak something in their back, and that's why it's now affected either a front or a rear leg. So all of these are super, 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 super important things to consider and to recognize, and again, to know the baseline and to be able to control your dog. Now, Scott mentioned an x-ray at the vet. I am not anti-x-ray at all. That wouldn't be the first thing I would do within, the first hour of an injury. I have not seen that happening as much as, let's try this, let's give the dogs this. And as of recent, I've been hearing a lot of vets say, oh, yeah, I think it's a full CCL tear, just looking at the dog visually, not feeling the knee or whatever with some sort of rehab vet. We have another client who the dog came up lame. The vet said, oh, it's OCD. I mean, that's fine. We can say whatever it is, but without imaging, we don't really know. And x-rays are not always going to solve everything. When Sink had...
MRIs are very expensive.
Yeah,
and
MRIs are very expensive.
That's what you need is an MRI for some of these things.
Or when I went down to BOSM with Sink when she was younger for ilio, micro tears in her iliopsoas, she had stem cells. There's an ultrasound that is actually going through her, and there's this very intense ultrasound. These are not things that every practice has, but if your vet does think an x-ray is warranted, I'm all about an x-ray, especially if something is not getting better. It's great to see, oh, is there a break? Is there a fracture? Did something happen? If there is a break or a fracture, is it because the dog has bone cancer? Is it because the dog, had some sort of trauma? I'm all about x-rays, but I am not seeing that be the vet's first go-to. And then, of course, with most dogs, you're going to look at anesthesia and everything else for an x-ray because they're not going to be compliant and everything else. So definitely, if your vet is advising it and you're concerned about it and it's been an issue that's been going on, do whatever diagnostic stuff that they're recommending. But just them saying oh, yeah, I think it's this. Oh, yeah, I think it's that. I don't know. It takes a very strong professional to be able to diagnose a lot of these things. A very good physical therapist or a very good orthopedic specialist, like the surgeon that operated on Jimmy, can diagnose these things by feel and by seeing how the knee is and everything else, but not every lay person can do that. We saw a few vets before we saw the orthopedic surgeon, actually, and my Eastern vet was the one that said it was a CCL thing, and they could not diagnose it that it was a CCL. No offense against them, but it's just not their specialty, and it's not, when you're at the top of your game for rehab, you really can diagnose things a little bit differently.
Well, you're seeing a lot of dogs with these same issues over and over, so you get a pretty good feel from when you see something. It's yep, I've seen that 1,000 times.
They see something and they feel something, and that brings me back to who is in your contact list, who is in your
circle, your dog circle.
Yeah, your inner circle. I mean, our dogs have a chiropractor, they have a massage therapist, they have an Eastern vet, they have a Western vet. I have a physical therapist for my dogs that she has seen all of our dogs. We actually had her on the podcast, Demetra. Her and I are quite close. I'm very grateful to her that when I do have an issue, I can text her and I can get in pretty quickly because it's very, very, very hard to get into rehab vets. I understand that not everyone has these relationships, nor are you planning to establish them, especially just with your single pet dog. But if you did have a problem in the past where your dog saw a rehab vet, if you're having an issue, it wouldn't be a bad idea to loop that person in and say, hey, do you have any cancellations in the next few days? They may say, hey, send me a video of what the dog looks like. I may be able to help you with this. So use your inner circle, your Rolodex of professionals. It should be getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and these should be people that you can rely on and that you can trust, and that's something I would definitely utilize. If I can get my dogs into chiro or into acupuncture or into massage when they're feeling sore, that's a really good first step for me before I'm going deeper and deeper and deeper into diagnostics.
One thing I'll say, if your dog has an acute injury, they hurt themselves almost right in front of you, or they were outside, they came in, and they're on 3 legs, I would help them move around by either putting a bath towel under their waist, or you put a leash under their waist and a leash on their neck, or whatever means you have, harness, whatever it is, to take that weight off the leg, to help them move around without just putting, either they're popping on it, but if they're kind of touching the ground and it's painful for them, you don't want them to be repeatedly doing that. If there's some kind of whether it's a soft tissue injury or if it's a bone issue, you just want to get them off that foot.
Yeah,
get them off
definitely.
that
And
leg.
this all goes back to handling. These are good things to practice. Can you walk your dog around with a towel under them on a leash right now when there's absolutely no issue? The last thing you
without them
want,
going into an alligator
yeah,
roll.
the last thing you want is the dog now being all environmental and hurting itself worse in these situations. Handling is extremely important. Conditioning a dog to a crate is extremely important. These are not things you want to introduce once there's a problem. You want the dog to be comfortable with these things so you can utilize them when a problem appears.
And we've talked about muzzles in this podcast, 1,000 times. But again, this is the time when it would be nice to put a muzzle on the dog if you need to get someone to look at this dog and touch them, and the dog maybe isn't especially social. Keeps everybody safe and comfortable getting in there and doing what they need to do. But it's not the time to introduce a muzzle if they've never had one before. It's just
completely.
more stress for the dog.
Completely. Very good point. If there's any vocalizing, if you see an issue, like you see an issue where, okay, this happened and then XYZ happened and the dog came up lame, even if it's not something crazy. Both times Jimmy tore his CCLs, I was standing right there in front of him. He probably had hard partials for years and never showed signs of it. And then pop, there they went. But I saw it happen right in the very moment. If you see something and your dog is screaming in pain, I'm not going to now be going in and giving arnica and turmeric, right? I mean, yes, some dogs get scared. They're concerned. If the dog is vocalizing or trembling or something else and in very extreme pain, the first thing you do is go to a veterinarian. Don't start playing all these tricks at home. This is for the type of thing where, you get back from the gym and you're a little bit sore and you tweak something and you're a little gimpy for a few days and then it improves. If the dog is in so much pain that they're vocalizing or they're trembling or they're not eating or something else, please, 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 please see a professional immediately. And always loop your professionals in. This is not in replacement of a professional, but these are just some things to maybe save you some time and money and a hardship. The last thing you want is a dog that just has a little issue. Now they go in for an x-ray. And ideally, they're anesthetizing the dog for an x-ray. But if they're not, and the dog, has a more severe injury because they were wiggling on the table, that's kind of a bummer. That's not a good way to go. Another
I wanted
product.
to say something else.
Go ahead.
If your dog comes up lame for whatever reason, and you do go to the vet, and they say, well, let's give them some Rimadyl or some gabapentin or some type of a painkiller, a pain management medication for a short period of time, and they do great after they've had one or two of these things. Don't let them go be a dog because it has masked the pain. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that they're all better now and they can go run around the yard. I would still be keeping them on a leash.
You can definitely make an injury worse.
I just want them to be more comfortable, but I don't want them running around being themselves, not until I know they're clear.
Yeah, and there's stages. Like, it's 3 to 5 days of the dog being a little quiet. Then it's not just, let's go for an off-leash hike up a mountain. Maybe we'll go for a leash walk on the street for, a mile or so or half a mile and then build up. There's stages to make sure the dog is progressing in the right direction. Another product I really like, and I brought it because I just emptied it last night and I was going to throw it out, but I thought, I'll throw it in the bag, are Selectrolytes. So they're really good for when there's soreness with the dog, when it could be muscular stuff, something else. Morin Labs in New Jersey sells this product, Selectrolytes. I just put a little capful in. Some dogs I give it to on a regular basis. Some dogs I give it to if they're showing signs of something. But it's just a good mineral replacement. It helps prevent dehydration, everything else. Just like electrolytes in humans. It's really helpful.
It's just like a human electrolyte. It's up top right now.
Bicarbonate, chloride, magnesium, phosphate, potassium, sodium, and purified water. Yeah. So I really like this product.
It's like LMNT for dogs.
A little bit. If you guys want to get a little crazy and give your dog something special for Christmas, I would highly recommend you get a Back on Track coat. There are great things out there like PEMF mats, loops like we talked about in the Wound podcast. If you're lucky enough to own a laser, all of these things are great. Back on Track coats are a magnetic coat. They're absolutely amazing. They make them for dogs and horses, I believe, and our dogs have them all custom made in all sizes. This is another thing that I would be doing the first 24 hours, putting a coat on them, trying to help them with magnets, trying to make them feel better to the best of our ability on our own terms, so everything can just keep moving along and they can be back to business as normal as quickly as possible. Anything else I'm missing? Any other gimpy stories or something else that we haven't touched on?
No, I mean, as far as the magnetic coats and the loops and
Don't piss me
PEMF
off.
stuff. I'm not trying to piss you off, but I mean, a lot of this stuff is not a ton of science behind these things, but it is something you can do that at least you feel like you're doing something for your dog. You're giving them attention, and you're trying to make them feel more calm, and I think that all does work. I mean, I don't know how much it speeds up recovery or not, but we certainly do everything in our power to try and help our dogs feel better. That's all I'll say.
No, definitely. It's important. And, the number one thing is if you see something with your dog, whether they just show up lame or you've been seeing a hitch for a while, video that. Video when that happens. Make record of, okay, it's happening after ball. Sometimes, repetitive motions cause it. Dogs on treadmills all the time.
Frozen ground.
Dogs, or dogs just going for the ball back and forth, turning the same direction every time. Start to kind of have an inventory of when you see that kind of stuff happening, so you can now bring this to a professional and say, okay, look, like the dog gets lame, this is what it looks like here, there, and everywhere. If you're going to be doing something major, so like a TPLO, starting levels are 4,500 in this country. High levels are probably 7,500 in this country. It's a very expensive surgery. Yes, very, very expensive surgery. That's just for one leg. I would recommend make sure that you're going to have insurance on your dog before you go to a vet with this problem, this long-term problem of, oh, my dog's been limping, everything else. I learned this the hard way with stem cell surgery with zinc. That was an expensive procedure as well. You can't just apply for insurance the day before you're going to do something and then have in your records that, I don't really like the way she looks on her rear end and everything else. So if you're concerned about something that keeps coming back up with your dog, make sure you have insurance on the front end before you go address this, recurring, very small problem to your vet, because that may preclude you then from being included in the insurance payout, which a lot of insurance companies do pay for the full TPLOs and everything else, or at least 90%, which is nice. You still have to front the money, but they're going to be returning the favor with a big check on the other end.
Yeah.
So we know it's scary when this kind of stuff happens. If your dog has never been lame before and then they pop up lame, the first inclination is to sweep them up and to sit there crying all night and, worry about the dog. Try to act as normal as possible. Try to be brave for the dog, but definitely control the dog. Set the dog up for success and, very quick healing by doing things like crating, doing things like leash walks, doing things maybe like some of these supplements or apparatuses or something else that we mentioned. Prom is great. If you do not have passive range of motion, please do it for me tonight. Google a video, figure out how to do it. You want to support all the joints properly and make sure your dog is comfortable with that. But it saved us many times. Oh, it's the outer toe that's bothering this dog. Oh, it's the shoulder that's bothering this dog. Oh, the middle of the back, there's a little bit of a tweak here. When I do this, I can tell it's a back issue. We're always able to help diagnose this better because we know the baseline for our own animals.
I would say preventatively, if you have a home that has a lot of tile or a lot of hardwood, with a nice polished high gloss finish on it, and it's like ice for your dogs flying around, you could strategically put in a few throw rugs here and there just for some traction. And also make sure all the hair around their paws is trimmed real tight, because it's just like they're like slippers when it's just all hair under the paw and they're running around and those legs are sliding out, and it can be a shoulder and it can be a hip that can really get tweaked hard on just a tile floor. Just run, especially young dogs, jumping off a couch onto tile, onto hardwood, all these things. We have a lot of dogs, we have a lot of expenses, and we're very cautious because we don't have a lot of money. And the money we do have, the dogs are top priority. So in my experience, a lot of people are more nonchalant about these things. I'm like, holy shit, don't let your freaking dog jump off that couch again. You're going to have a big problem. Yeah. I'm like, he just does that. He doesn't listen. Yeah. But it can be a big expense. Yeah. And not to mention, the dog just has to be in a crate for like months. Yeah, it loses all of its fun. Yeah. And I'm glad that Scott mentioned prevention. It's a great point to bring up. The more muscle your dog has on it, the less it's going to less likely it is to get injured. It's just basic fact of life. The video of the lab freaking running after the hockey puck on the ice, if you've
ever seen that video. Oh my God, it's a terrible
scary.
orthopedic video. I can't believe the whole crowd is cheering. No
Like
amount of
it's
muscle.
like Bambi with all four
No
legs.
amount of muscle is going to freaking help a dog like that not get a severe injury. Use common sense in these situations. But the more, conditioned your dog is, the less likely they are to get injured as well. So I hope that you guys learned something here today. If your dog is limping, don't freak out. We have faith that it'll be okay. And there's a lot of ways you can make them feel more comfortable right in the comfort of your own home. Thank you guys so much for joining us here this week. If you need anything, feel free to email us at studio@thequirkydog.com. And in the meantime, keep it quirky. Bye, guys.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.